dej tam to rozličit, jestli můžeš to na ten nastavení toho rozlišení, tady to 24. Tak ono potom se to. Ještě akorát možná to bude, že ty máš otevřený v čem? Browseru? Jo, no. Tak když to otevřeš Events, tak když to otevřeš Events, tak pak to funguje v pohodě. Jo, okay.
No, tam je správně rozlišení.
Jo, ten otevřeš Events a měl by to být v pohodě.
Panika.
It works out of the box.
One of the very few things it does.
You're in my spot.
Check.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey Bruno, what's up?
Check, check.
1630.
1,
check,
2, 3.
Check.
Check, check. And German. And German.
So we've got 23 minutes.
22.
22 minutes. Supposedly, Radek wants us also to be not running too late, right? So let's give it let's try. So this is the agenda for 23 minutes. The slides are. This is the wrong link. You need to put serverless dash containers the other way around. Whatever. There's a long explanation which we don't have time for. Anyway, lots of content, lots of slides. We're going to rush through them. But you know, we're here for the next 3 days, and we love talking about this stuff. So, okay, let's start. So who are you?
I'm this one. So I'm Vašek Pavlín. I work for Red Hat for the last 5 years and something. And I really like containers. If it's not obvious, I really like containers. And I will be the one who says that containers are great. And I will try to argue with Matthias if I have a chance. Always love to do that. Who are you?
I'm Matthias. I also like containers. I also love Red Hat. For different reasons, I'm not working for Red Hat anymore. A small startup out of Germany since the beginning of the year. Yeah, but we are here to discuss containers and serverless. So a little bit on like a sidetrack story, like how we got our discussion started. It was basically DockerCon EU in Barcelona. So you clearly see us two back there discussing about why containers are good.
It was a great party.
It was a good party. Back in the day, there was serverless, and I thought it was crap. So back in the day, you know, back in the happy days, we were on the same track. But then I got distorted and thought about other things.
And we still argued about why are containers good and why are bad and for whom and stuff like that.
Right,
So
yeah, we still argue.
We always
argue, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what this talk is not about. And that's that you can't say, but you need servers for serverless. That's too obvious. That's not a good question. Also, yes, you probably need containers to run serverless, so we don't talk about that either. And also, I edited the slides, but this is an older version, so it's also not about running less command on a server. So just so that you know, it's for you. You don't have to ask again. Okay, so give me the clicker. Okay. About serverless, generally, there is like a big hype now. So everyone was in containers a couple of years ago. Now everyone is like jumping on serverless. So there is plenty of open source projects. If you want to know more about them, you can look them up. There are some names, some like famous ones. What Red Hat is interested in is OpenWhisk. We might have heard about it. We have some slides at the end if we get there. But it's mostly looking at like running it on Kubernetes OpenShift and trying to bend these orchestrators to run serverless functions, something like that. So what we are going to talk about is if you are a developer and you develop something and you develop like web-based things which have APIs or which have UIs or something like that, then we will probably talk about you, or it might be interesting for you. If you do like embedded stuff and heavy lifting on big bare metal servers with all sort of weird hardware, it might not be that interesting. Because that's not where serverless is aiming. It's more about like web stuff, APIs, event-driven stuff. So that's what we aim for. And I think that it's your turn to tell them something about what is it. If you know, you might not know really. So.
So it's about focusing on the developer, right? And we used to work for developer tools, and we have this magic magic developer, right? Who does things. With everything, take it with a grain of salt. But there's a general approach, and there's a general trend here where people are seeing serverless as something beneficial for the ordinary developer. But it's always differentiating. Like Vašek is a different developer than me. I'm not. Yeah. So serverless, right? There is this hype term, and again, it's like servers. Things that you need to look into and differentiate about are these kind of things. The terms. The first one is function as a service. That's probably what most people think about when they talk about serverless. The whole idea is that you write a small function, throw it somewhere, and that's it. And we're actually going to discuss a little bit like how far you can get this and how far you can do this with containers. But it's the idea is that you don't care about that it's Linux, right? You just write your function and you throw it somewhere and it runs. And that's function as a service. That's the one part. The other part, which is crucial, and Chris Wright this morning alluded to this a little bit, is that this little bit functions. So we saw like 10 open source implementations, and there's a new one coming out every day. That's great, and it's going to be fun. But in the end, this function as a service is only a small part. In the end, the event-driven part is going to be the one. The events that you can see and that you consume and that you interact with is the interesting part, and seeing how you can work with that. So event-driven is a really crucial part. And the next thing that you need to think about and remember, it's not only about these two. It's also around thinking about like putting software as a service to the next level. That's a little bit the backend as a service is alluding to that. So it's about like having a backend, and it's ready when you are. It's ready when your request is there, and you're not renting a service for for 100 euros a month, but you're renting like only for a per request basis, right? So the first thing that comes up is PaaS and CaaS. Is that a service? Is that serverless, right? And Adrian Cockcroft, a famous person in the cloud space, said like if your PaaS can efficiently jump up in 20 milliseconds, then you could call it serverless. I think there are a couple of traits which out of this book, out of Mike Roberts' book, and I think if you think about these and map these to your environment and your mapping, then you get a sense whether this is this shifting or not. I'm just going to run these through these. So first of all, it does not require a long-lived server or application instance, so it's only something ephemeral. It self-auto-scales based on load. It offers cost-based prices, usage up from down to zero. right? So if if my website is serverless and it's not seen by anyone, I don't pay anything. Has performance capabilities defined in other than host size and count, so you somehow measure this differently, and has implicit high availability. We can go through all these in detail. No time. One example, just for the curiosity, back last year I got interested in this stuff. So what do you do as an engineer? You build something, right? So this is a very simple example on AWS, and you see these Lambda functions, you see typical events, you see an authentication service out of AWS, and these things interact with each other. And as said, this is your application code. You write a function. This Node.js is the canonical example, but small functions in the language that the provider provides, and that's basically it. You listen to events and you do things. So containers, Vašek.
We build on assumption that you already know what generally containers are in the Linux space and stuff like that, but just to give you the comparison of where serverless is and where containers are. I made this picture. I took it from evolution of Windows or something like that. But if you think about it, serverless is very focused, very concrete thing. You have function, you write your logic in there, and it's run on different events. That's it. You can't really do anything else. You don't want it to run for a long time. You don't want it to consume a lot of memory. You just want to have it spawn up, killed, done. But for containers, you can do that. See, microservices are probably the closest to that, let's say. But then you have a minimal use case where I've seen startups doing IoT with containers and updating their applications on the IoT endpoints in Docker containers. You can have desktop apps in containers like Flatpak. You can have system services that systemd team was working on containerize all the services, and not only systemd team, many other people are. Your mobile phone is probably running something like containers, and the applications are running something like containers. And there is probably something else that I don't have on the list that will be even better and more useful than anything of that. So the idea of containers generally, from a developer point of view, is that they are very versatile, very flexible. You can basically do anything with them. Unlike serverless functions, you just write a function and you run it, which you kind of can do anything in that function, but there are constraints and there are complete different approaches to how to solve the things. So what we try to focus on and what we talked about a lot when we started to look at serverless and comparing them to containers is the developer's workflow. So if you are a developer, you probably know your own workflow, and it looks something like this. You code, then you build your application, you run it, you run some tests, and you deploy it to production ideally. And you go round and round because you find some bugs, so you code again, you build it, you run it, you test it, blah, 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 blah. So if you look at these steps in the workflow and compare them, well, I tried. What is it like to be in a container space and what is it like to be in a serverless space? You will get that for coding, it's probably the same. You open your Visual Studio Code, like Matthias or me, and you type some commands in your favorite language, and that's it. And you build a function, you structure it somehow. Well, it's kind of obvious. It's hard if you want to debug serverless. It's different than if you're debugging application on your running on your laptop. So, but there are things, there are plugins, there are extensions that can allow you that. The next step, building. So if you build containers, you can go from a very low-level approach, like writing a Docker file. So you basically write a glorified shell script, and then you build your application. Or you can go with some very smart approach, like source-to-image in OpenShift, where you just say, this is my repository with the code, and it's Python application, and you get a running application on your cluster. And there are other ways how to build containers. In serverless, it's very cool. It's called zip. You take the code, you package it in zip, and you upload it somewhere to the cloud, and it takes care of that. Obviously, if you write in Java or Golang, you first need to compile the code anyway, and then put it in zip file, and then upload it to S3 in case of Lambda. But yeah, you can get very similar approach like S2I and the zip script that you run or something, whatever. Generally, you want a one-click solution for that. So in your IDE, you click build, and you get some artifact that you can deploy, right? I will wait till you take a picture. Great. Then next step is to run your application. And the problem is that there are people that still want to run their applications locally. I don't know why. Well, you want to do everything in cloud, right? No, so you want to run locally. So with Docker, with containers, with other containers like, I don't know if you use Cryos, whatever, Builda, whatever we come up with, you can do it very easily. So you either run the direct command that starts the container, or you use some helper like Docker Compose, or you even run it locally on OpenShift or Kubernetes. Pick your poison. With serverless, if you want to run locally, you have to mock everything, especially if you use a lot of these backend services. You will not probably want to contact your S3 or consume data from your S3 to your local laptop because you will pay for every single request. So we have to mock everything, and there are ways how to do it. Azure has a local environment for running functions. You can also deploy OpenWhisk on OpenShift locally. It's going to probably kill your laptop, but you can try, and then run your functions on that. But still, it's different. But you can do it. You can run locally, and in worst case, as with containers, you can do everything remotely. For testing, there are very, very diverse types of testing. You probably know that. Everyone writes tests here, right? And for containers, there are specific projects that let you test containers easily. Running unit tests with containers is very simple. It's like running them on your local machine without containers. Integration testing can be done locally if you have all the pieces and everything. With serverless, we are basically for local and for developer workflow stuff, you're probably only left with unit testing. Integration testing is probably more complicated because you need to get it to that cloud that you are locked on, vendor locked on the AWS or Azure or whatever, and you basically have to run the stuff there to get all the services and do the integration testing. So it's a bit different, but still can be done. There are ways how to hack around that. And for deployment, serverless is very simple. You have that zip file that's already in the cloud because you wanted to test it, and you just say, use that one, use that S3 bucket for production. For containers, let's say you have your image built, pushed somewhere, so you need orchestration. You need to figure out which one of those is the best for you, whether you run it on a bare metal hardware or some cloud provider, or if you take a managed service or whatever. So that's a bit more complicated. And at this point, I think that serverless is great. Why? Like simplifying deployment for if you are a single developer and you want to just get things running. And you want to automate everything. So using CI and stuff like that for containers, it's a very broad ecosystem of tools and of ways how to do things. But I think generally we agree that it's similar. It's not that different from the developer's point of view, how you develop for containers and how you develop for serverless.
Right. So the workflow is pretty similar. There might be the tools that are a little bit different, but in the end, it's not that like it's a mind shifting. You're still using the same tools, and the other integrations are getting there. The next thing to consider is architectural considerations, right? The event-driven small functions, the thing that you only pay if something is getting used is changing things, right? And first, when you encounter serverless, if you start using it, it's limiting, right? At the same time, while it is very powerful because you write your small functions for your Alexa skill or for some web application, whatever. It's right there. You don't have to do anything, and you can leave it running. But at the same time, when you then, if you're going beyond your Hello World applications, you want to do something, you need to think about things because things are different, right? So can I use my container application code and just put it in serverless? Some try, but in AWS currently the container dies after 5 minutes. And you don't have all the parameters that you might want to need to. The compute is limited, right? You cannot say again in AWS I want to run this serverless container there, right? There are other options there, but it is limiting. And you need to look differently at your application architecture because you're now thinking about, so one part which is great is that the distribution or the scaling is built in. At the same time, that also means that everything communicates all the time, right? You're sending events, etc. And then you need to, the limitation is suddenly changing. The limits posed on your application are suddenly changing. You need to look at it differently. And there are other things which just me personally, I think is very, very interesting. Is that you suddenly, when I started building the applications, and you only have these small codes, and you're using existing APIs like the authentication service, you suddenly think about your application architecture differently. You suddenly think maybe this is an API. And then if you're using an API, you suddenly think maybe someone else has built this, right? So I'm always people around reusing software. We're trying this since 20 years, since 30, since 50 years. We're basically trying to build reusable components, and we suck at it. But I'm saying it's like, maybe there's something there. And these are the existing limitations, right? And I don't know if any OpenWhisk folks are in here, but it's on you to build it better, right? These are the existing limitations. That doesn't mean that they have to be there. It's what the economics of Amazon, what they've decided to do. And maybe the open source folks know better and know how to build the better version out of it, right? So for an OpenWhisk, for example, you have the capability of choosing, of building your base container images and having them ready to run. So maybe some of the limitations don't apply, which also imposes like other questions. But I'm just saying, like I want to be here next year, and someone from you guys giving the talk and building the better fast. Yeah, now I'm talking too much, right? Yeah.
As always.
There's a great paper by Gorko Acic around economic and architectural impact. Read it. DevOps responsibility. So another aspect around the things changing for developers in the container serverless space. DevOps, right? The first question is like, what is DevOps in the first place? And I would say
don't answer. Don't answer.
Well, I'm not going to try. But there's tons of different answers. But what I found interesting, first of all, there's still DevOps, right? I think Netflix set the bless you. I think Netflix set proposed the no ops